a large fuzzy picture of me, and this is me in real life. So look here, please. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Carina Millstone. I'm the Executive Director of Feedback, as Elke just said. Today I really want to share with you what I think has been the evolution of feedback in the last decade, when we held our very first Feeding the 5,000, and really understand where we're at today with food waste and what it means for opportunities going forward. So to kick us off, we all care about food waste. Why should we care about food waste? I mean, why is this a problem? So I think 10 years ago, people would have answered this question saying, oh, actually, it's an absolute scandal, good food going to waste when there's hunger in the world. I think many of us would have been raised with our kids, with our parents telling us, you must finish what's on your plate. There are some starving children in Africa. You know, those kind of ideas. Today in the UK, there's a record number of families who do not know where their next meal is coming from. I mean, this is clearly a scandal. And there are, of course, many, many charities working really hard at intercepting food from supermarkets and other places and redistributing this food to those in need. And yet, in my view, I think conflating the fight against food insecurity and the fight against food waste is ultimately a mistake. Fighting food insecurity requires a fair economic system and a robust welfare state, whereas the fight against food waste is about something else altogether. So what is it exactly? Why is it a problem? Well, as Elke touched upon, food waste is really a problem because food embodies a massive use of resources. Land, soil, energy, water, the lot. And therefore, food waste is a remarkable squandering of said resources because they are used at great expense. How's that? Still working? Yeah. This is civil society not obeying orders. I was told fix it and I put it in a pocket. So next speakers take note. That doesn't work. Right. I will hold it. Right, so this food is grown at great expense, environmental expense, to produce food that generates zero nutritional value because it's never eating. So this is a giant waste of resources. So this is where we're at today. Food waste is a problem because it's an environmental tragedy, first and foremost. And the environmental tragedy is really now so acute, be it aquifer depletion, be it climate change, being soil depletion, biodiversity loss, etc., 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 is now so acute that food waste is ultimately now our threat to our food security and to the viability of our Earth's ecosystems. Serious stuff, guys. Now, I think what's useful about thinking about food waste in this way is that it informs action going forward. It's primarily an ecological issue, therefore solutions to food waste cannot be divorced from our efforts to tackle the ecological crisis. Take climate change, for example. Elke already mentioned, food waste is a climate issue. It turns out that climate is one of the only environmental challenges where there is an internationally agreed framework of what we should do, the Paris process. It is absolutely imperative that food waste be integrated into the Paris process. By this I mean that signatories to the Paris Agreement quantify the emissions reduction potential of food waste and integrate these into the agriculture component of the nationally determined contribution. This is a key policy ask that I'm making here today. This is not something the EU is currently doing. It's a mistake. It's absolutely imperative that this is integrated. We cannot solve climate change without addressing food waste. Now, a further benefit of thinking about food waste as a squandering of resources in relation to its failure to generate nutritional value is that it immediately positions food waste in the context of other situations where this waste of resources occur. For example, sugar, perhaps even worse, a product that is grown that is actively bad for us, let alone generating no nutritional value. Arguably, we have the same issue with animal crops. Animal feed, crops that are grown to feed animals rather than people. In that sense, also a loss of nutritional value. And thinking about food waste in this way, it's very clear that we can't divorce it from wider food strategies and food policies. food waste touches so intimately on these issues of public health, nutrition, food and farming, sustainable agriculture. So looking forward, we really want to see food waste integrated into food policies, not an issue that somehow sits outside of the food system. Fine, so we now know why food waste is a problem. You know, it's a threat to life on Earth, essentially. No one likes it. One of those rare issues with cross-country, cross-political, cross-sectoral, cross-societal consensus. We don't like it. So why is it still happening? I mean, feedback, we've been working on this for the last 10 years. Why is there just all this food waste still going on? So, the causes of food waste, over the last 10 years, we've thought of them as technical failures, or behaviour problems, or problems with trading, business rules and trading rules. And we've really seen an evolution of our understanding of why food waste occurs. So, maybe 10 years ago, food waste would have been thought of as a technical failure. There'd be moments where storage stops working, there's issues with refrigeration, supply chains break down. So there's going to be this notion that food waste is more like food loss, that it would be solved through technology alone, better refrigeration. But maybe these were the days when we understood food waste somehow as being outside of human agency, which is clearly not the case. More recently, we've understood that loads of food waste actually occurs in the home. And we've put forward, this is all a question of consumer behaviour. What can we do to get households to waste less? And this has given rise to all sorts of techno gadgets, pasta measurers and fridge thermometers, and all sorts of public information campaigns on how to meal plan for your meals better, how to use your leftovers, how to store things properly. Most notably, of course, Love Food, Hate Waste in the UK. These initiatives have been great, and some of them have had moderate success, and yet households still waste huge amounts of food. More recently still, we've come to realise there's huge amounts of food left in fields, overseas, but also here in Europe. And this waste in the fields has been attributed to unfair business dealings that go above and beyond natural causes. So these so-called unfair trading practices arise when there's some power imbalances in the supply chain, and where buyers can set the terms of business with their suppliers. So, for example, changing their mind about an order, cancelling it at the last minute, setting cosmetic specifications that are really harsh, and all these things that suddenly mean a farmer is unable to bring his product to market, and there's huge amounts of waste generated on his farm, and a loss of income. So, this mixture of technical, behavioural, and issues in terms of trading practices. And yet, for me, none of these go to the root cause of food waste. And in that sense, I don't think we can solve food waste with technical interventions alone or behaviour change interventions alone. Neither do I think that bringing about fairer market dealings will necessarily result in the end of food waste, because we already know that food waste still occurs when no irregularity has taken place in a business dealing. So, what is the root cause of food waste then? So, many of you will be veterans of these kind of events. There are a lot of them. There have been a lot of them over the years. And each time I go to an event, usually with business people or policymakers, someone always says, sagely, food waste is a symptom of a dysfunctional food system. Yes, we can all agree on that. It sounds good. And yet, never in that polite company have we spent a moment thinking deeply, what exactly is the nature of the dysfunction in the food system that has led the food system to suffer from this really bad case of generalised food waste? So, what is the nature of that dysfunction? Well, in my view, that dysfunction is due to systematic, normalised over-everything. Overproduction by farmers, overselling by supermarkets, over-purchase by consumers. That means there's just simply too much food going through the food system, from the farms, through distributors, to cupboards and fridges, and to landfill. Which brings me to another question: why do we have this systematized overproduction? And in my mind here, this is maybe when this gets a bit controversial, there are two drivers to overproduction. The first is the corporation, the shareholder-owned corporation, food corporation. I'm talking here about big food. We all know who these people are. We interact with them all the time, whether we like it or not. This is big food that shapes our food economy, that shapes our food culture. Let's take the example of UK supermarkets. If you are a British adult, presumably you eat. And therefore, along with 98% of other British adults, you have probably visited one of 5 supermarkets in the last week. Now, these supermarkets, what they share in common is that they are primarily a mechanism for the generation of financial value to their shareholders. And this mechanism drives cost externalization and growth. So, essentially, these supermarkets have a business model of shifting large volumes of low-cost products to their customers. And therefore, whether they like it or not, they have a vested interest in getting us to over-purchase in store. About 1 bag in every 5 bought back from a British supermarket will end up in the bin. Now, they may say that they want to help their customers make better choices, etc., etc. The truth is, what we see is a consistent application of marketing techniques that push over consumption, be it inaccurate date labellings, inadequate packaging size, promotional offers. So, why are they getting away with this? A business model that we know leads to waste in people's homes, but also in their supply chains. Well, they're getting away with it through thanks to the second factor that in my mind is leading to systematic overproduction, namely an inadequate market framework, one in which businesses, the food corporations I mentioned earlier, are enabled in their profit generation through the possibility of externalizing their environmental costs. That is to say, generating food waste and degrading the environment without bearing any financial penalties for doing so. And so, if we're really serious about moving beyond food waste, I think we need to transition away from this food economy, where there's a corporate profit paradigm that dominates, to a new food economy. Running out of time, so to recap very quickly, I think in the last 10 years, we've really made incredible strides at understanding why food waste is a problem. It's a problem because it's a massive contributor to the ecological crisis and to our food security. And if we are to live on a viable planet and be fed, we must address food waste. We cannot solve these issues without solving the issue of food waste. Over the years, there's been all sorts of interventions, behavioural, technical, trade rule changes. They've been great. We've made great strides about understanding what works and what doesn't, and we'll see more examples today. And yet, in my mind, there will be a plateau, and there already is a plateau in the effectiveness of these interventions. And that's because they do not get to the root cause of food waste generation. That is to say, systemized overproduction that comes from a food economy that prioritizes, that enables and protects corporate profit on the back of environmental degradation. And so, what I would like to see, and I think needs to happen urgently now, is a transition to a new food economy, one which is not organised around this generation of corporate profit, but instead one in which the guiding principle has to be that the purpose of land, the purpose of farming, the purpose of resource use is ultimately the creation of good, nutritional food that is eaten and not wasted. Thank you.